The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which I'll call UNC Chapel Hill from here on out, could have been well on its way to having light rail connecting to the Durham, North Carolina Amtrak station. But plans for bringing light rail there failed. And in this video, we're going to talk about why it failed. Ideas for rail transit of some form in the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area of North Carolina, also known as the Triangle, go back to at least the 1990s. Even back then, the Triangle Transit Authority, a mass transit entity in the Triangle area now known as Go Triangle, was dreaming of some form of rail service in the area. But signs of major progress for light rail in the area came back in the early 2010s when voters in Orange County, where Chapel Hill is located, and Durham County, where Durham is located, approved a sales tax that would help fund the local portion of a project for light rail between Chapel Hill and Durham. Orange County voted in favor of a tax by a margin of 59% to 41%, while Durham County voted in favor by a margin of 60% to 40%. Many people hate tax hikes of any kind, so it says something that the voters in these two counties were so desperate for rail transit that they voted, pretty emphatically, to pay more taxes to make that happen. The line was expected to begin construction in 2020 and complete construction in 2028. Those tax hikes were going to help cover the portion of the cost from local governments. That local government portion was 25% of the funding for this project. This meant that the other 75% had to come from elsewhere, and that elsewhere was supposed to be a combination of funding from the federal government and funding from the state of North Carolina. The image I have up on screen shows what the proposed stations were for this light rail line connecting Chapel Hill to Durham. I'm not going to read off of this list because that would be boring. I'm also not going to comment on all 17 of these stops because the video would become unreasonably long if I did that. Rather, I'm going to give my thoughts on some of the stations listed here. UNC Hospital is also near the UNC Chapel Hill football stadium. Because of that, the UNC Hospital stop would, I'm guessing, have served the stadium. It also would have been the closest station to downtown Chapel Hill, which is close to a mile away from UNC Hospital. Their second stop, Mason Farm Road, would have been near their basketball arena, and part of the long-term vision for that station involved a redesign of the parking lot by their basketball arena to help facilitate transfer to the light rail stop there. Many of the stops between downtown Chapel Hill and downtown Durham are in suburban areas. I'm not going to talk about these stops in detail, but I will say, looking at the plan in more detail, I can't help but notice that along with the building of light rail at many of these suburban stops, there are also plans to add infrastructure for walking and biking, making it easier to use environmentally friendly forms of transit in the Durham and Chapel Hill areas. Kudos to transit planners for thinking about that as well. Once we get to the Durham end of the line, there are a couple of stations that would have served the Duke University campus. LaSalle Street had proximity to some of Duke's West campus. The Duke VA Medical Center stop was going to serve parts of Duke's Central campus, as well as the Duke University Hospital. The area by this hospital would become the center of controversy for this plan, but we'll get to that controversy later in this video. A few stops after then were in downtown Durham, serving Durham's Amtrak station. So if the light rail were built, a student at UNC Chapel Hill could take Amtrak to Durham, then take light rail to Chapel Hill, or vice versa if a student is heading out of Chapel Hill. The end of the line in Durham is the North Carolina Central University campus, a campus that, while not as large as UNC Chapel Hill, still boasts a sizable population of around 7,500 students, and therefore a sizable potential ridership base due to the fact that many college students are less likely to own cars than other populations. What do I think of the plan? Personally, I think it was good, but there are things that could have made it so much better. Some of the good is that it would have provided large student bodies with access to frequent mass transit, namely UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, and North Carolina Central University. Another good element of the plan is that access to the major event venues in Durham and Chapel Hill was mostly good. There would have been access provided to UNC's football and basketball venues, as well as to the stadium for the minor league baseball Durham Bulls. The light rail wouldn't have gotten that close to Duke's football stadium or basketball arena, but I can't be too mad at the plan for that, because it might have been a challenge to get light rail from that area to downtown Durham without neglecting other important parts of Durham. Besides, their football stadium and basketball arena are small enough that you might be able to get away with only providing more bus service if it's deemed that transit improvements are needed for the area by the football stadium and basketball arena. My favorite part of the plan is how, particularly at the more suburban stops, there was an emphasis on improvements for pedestrians and cyclists, along with improvements to mass transit. To highlight this, let's take a random proposed station in the suburban portion between the UNC Chapel Hill campus and the Duke campus. The proposed gateway station was what I selected. Among the recommended added amenities around the station were, quote, 4 miles of new sidewalks, 2 miles of new streets, and a mile of new paths, including a bike and pedestrian connection at Eastone, end quote. And to make sure this wasn't an anomaly, I checked out the plan for their Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway stop in Durham, which didn't just include a light rail station, but improvements to pedestrian infrastructure. Looking at the plan in more detail, it almost feels like the light rail proposal was part of a larger strategy by the powers that be to encourage environmentally sustainable modes of transit in the Durham and Chapel Hill areas. I like that. Unfortunately, the plan, if built, would have had 3 missed opportunities that I just cannot ignore in this video. One missed opportunity was that the line would not have gone to downtown Chapel Hill. The UNC Hospital stop is close to a mile away from downtown Chapel Hill, which is a bit far. I'm not going to be too sharp in my criticism, though, because there were hopes for an extension in the future that got light rail towards downtown Chapel Hill and even to the neighboring town of Carborough. The other 2 missed opportunities, in contrast, are on items that weren't part of the planned extensions for the light rail line. The second missed opportunity is the lack of connection to Research Triangle Park. When you consider that Research Triangle Park has over 60,000 employees, that's a large enough employment base that a Chapel Hill to Durham light rail plan should have at least taken more of a look at what light rail to Research Triangle Park would have involved. The third missed opportunity is the lack of connection to Raleigh-Durham International Airport, just a few miles beyond Research Triangle Park. According to Travel Magazine, Raleigh-Durham International Airport is currently the 35th busiest airport in the United States by passenger traffic. San Jose's airport, which is several spots below Raleigh-Durham in the rankings for busiest airports, has 2 light rail lines going there. Those missed opportunities, while not enough for me to say that it's a bad plan, are ones that I think keep me from saying that it was a great plan. But still, I think it was a good plan, and I don't think the perfect should be the enemy of the good. However, we're not even getting an opportunity with the light rail, even with these flaws, because the plan got derailed. But how did that happen? The first sign of trouble was the reluctance on the state's part to fund the project. Originally, the state was going to cover $600 million for the cost of the project. However, North Carolina's General Assembly gradually reduced the funding to the point that the state would only fund $500,000 for the project, which, for a project that was going to cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 billion, was essentially the equivalent of giving pennies. And this created a significant shortfall that would have been difficult to overcome. Then the General Assembly was willing to give more money, up to $190 million. But there was a catch. They had to secure all non-state funding for the project within 2 years, or else lose out on funding from the state. But to secure the federal part of the funding, part of the non-state funding, they had to negotiate cooperative agreements with key local partners. We'll get to one of those partners in a moment. The North Carolina General Assembly's apparent hatred for nice public transit things made this project difficult to execute. However, it was still possible, even with how much the General Assembly was sabotaging this project. But remember how I said that cooperative agreements needed to be negotiated with key local partners? One of those partners, Duke University, refused to sign an agreement, thus essentially killing the project. As to why they killed the project, it's due to concerns about project construction with regard to interference with their hospital and its operations. Remember how I noted earlier in this video that there was a proposed stop by Duke University Hospital? Well, proximity to that hospital led Duke to raise concerns, noting in particular electromagnetic interference, vibrations, potential disruption to power and other utilities, and liability. Now, I am not an expert on hospital operations, but I find it extremely puzzling that UNC Chapel Hill, which was slated to have a UNC hospital station, didn't express the same issues. And it's also puzzling to me that other cities, such as Houston and Minneapolis, have been able to get light rail within close proximity of medical centers, with things going fine in both places, as far as I can tell. And it's puzzling to me why they thought that constructing and having rail around the hospital was an issue when they constructed and had a people mover there for a while, something that is a form of passenger rail, albeit on a smaller scale than light rail. By the way, if you look closely enough at this picture, you will see the old people mover, which is no longer at the hospital. So it is possible to have rail transit near hospitals. But Duke, for reasons I may never understand, didn't think likewise, and they got the project off track by failing to sign a cooperative agreement for the rail in 2019. Without the cooperative agreement, federal funding was not possible. And with federal funding not being possible, state funding was not possible. And with neither federal nor state funding possible, the project was dead. Go Triangle's Board of Trustees saw this, and because of that, they voted to discontinue the project. North Carolina's General Assembly should definitely shoulder a fair bit of the blame for this project dying. They reduced funding, then increased funding, but attached the 2-year deadline for securing other funding. If the light rail planners had more than 2 years, maybe that would have given them the opportunity to work out a solution amenable to Duke's concerns, assuming that Duke's concerns were not some facade hiding that they disapproved of light rail of any kind on or near their campus. But Duke should get a lot of blame as well. They could have looked to how UNC Chapel Hill, or how Houston, or how Minneapolis planned or were planning to have light rail near hospital facilities, so that light rail would have been possible in their case. They should have done that, because having better mass transit on campus would have been in the best interests of their students. But alas, they either didn't think to do that or didn't care to do that. The taxpayers of Durham County, where Durham is, and Orange County, where Chapel Hill is, should be furious with Duke. $157 million of their taxpayer money was spent planning this light rail project only for Duke to kill the project. Is there a way for Duke to refund the taxpayers of Durham and Orange counties? If the consequences for killing this project were refunding taxpayers for the cost spent planning this project, then maybe Duke would have reacted differently. Also, as a side note, Duke has something called an Office of Sustainable Duke. All the while, they killed off a pro-sustainability light rail project. Someone, please help me make sense of this. Though, in spite of my dunking on Duke, I should emphasize that this video was actually created because of UNC Chapel Hill. Because, you see, UNC Chapel Hill student body has a population large enough to be eligible for my series on how to bring passenger rail to large college campuses. It was only upon learning about this proposed project that I decided not to include UNC Chapel Hill in this series, but instead make a video on the proposed and failed project to connect Chapel Hill to the Durham Amtrak station. Nowadays, there's a proposal to bring passenger rail to the Triangle area, but is a proposal to go between Durham and southeast of Raleigh. It does not go all the way to Chapel Hill, meaning that UNC Chapel Hill would go without any form of rail transit. The future of the aforementioned proposal, from what I read, is uncertain, but that is getting off topic from this particular video. It is on topic, though, for transit advocates hoping to get some form of light rail or commuter rail to the Triangle area of North Carolina. I'd love to end this video on a positive note, even though I know that the last several minutes have been a bummer. But honestly, I'm struggling to do that. UNC Chapel Hill is a large university that should have strong access to rail transit of some form, had an opportunity to have said transit, and lost that opportunity because of an uncooperative rival school, as well as uncooperative politicians. And, as far as I can tell, I don't see any plans for the foreseeable future to bring any form of rail transit to Chapel Hill. About the only positive thing I can say, given how much this video made me fuming with Duke, was that UNC Chapel Hill beat Duke the last time they played each other in college men's basketball. Or at least that's a positive thing if you are a fan of UNC basketball. If you're a fan of Duke basketball, well, maybe not such a positive thing. If you have any thoughts on this failed light rail proposal, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and have a good day.